Hello and welcome to the Semex podcast. My name is 𝘥𝘪𝘴𝘦𝘢𝘴𝘦, corporate photographer and content creator. And I'm joined as always by Brenda Lee, our communication specialist. Hi, Brenda.
Hi, Clarissa. Same title for me, new title for you. Let's hear about it.
Yeah, we're jumping into something new for me in January this year. Just been out on farms with Mike and Jim, doing some daughter and dam photos, and we've also gotten into the barns to get some bull photos. So it's been fun so far.
Yeah, awesome. Well, congratulations on the new role.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're very excited for you. But you're still going to be organizing our podcast and co-hosting with me. You're not leaving me?
Not leaving you.
Awesome. Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know.
So today we have Dr. Shannon Beard with us to talk about Immunity Plus and bird flu. It's a very current topic and something that we think everybody should be really interested in hearing about. So welcome, Shannon.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be
Hey,
on
Shannon.
here.
Good to meet you.
Good to
Why
meet you
don't
too.
you start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself, Shannon? What's your background, your education? What drew you to Semex?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a triple Guelph grad. I did my undergrad, master's, and PhD at the University of Guelph. My master's work was with Christine Bays at the Center for Genetic Improvement of Livestock. I worked on using new data sources like milk in mid-infrared spectra to predict feed efficiency in dairy cattle. Then for my PhD, I worked in Bonnie Millard's lab, and that's where the high immune response technology was invented. And my PhD project was in collaboration with Semex, and we focused on translating high immune response technology to Angus beef cattle. I was really drawn to Semex during my PhD. I saw that it had a strong focus on cutting edge research, but in an industry relevant way. And I found that it kind of sits at the intersection of science and both real world application. So that idea really appealed to me. And I liked the idea of working somewhere where genetics, data, and practical use can all come together. And so that's what made it feel like the right fit for me.
And are you from a farm?
I'm not. I actually grew up in Mississauga.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to Guelph, thinking of vet school, but discovered other pathways in agriculture and fell in love with agriculture and dairy science. And yeah.
Well, we're happy to have you. And then you joined Semex when?
In 2023.
Okay. So it'll be 3 years ago.
Yes, almost 3. Yeah.
And what was your first project? Was this your first project?
So I started off as a beef geneticist. So my first project was mostly on the Angus immunity side, and now I'm a research geneticist, so I've got on the dairy side as well. So, but this was my first large scale project where we actually published a paper.
Awesome. Well, I guess that's a bit of a spoiler alert that we might be someday soon talking about Immunity Plus and Angus, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Okay. All right. So tell us about this study.
Yeah. So given the spillover of avian influenza into dairy cattle a few years ago, we had an objective of looking at immunity genomic selection to see if it can improve resilience to avian influenza. So we had 2 main objectives. The first was to evaluate the relationship between a cow's immunity plus breeding value and their probability of requiring supportive treatment during bird flu infection, and also wanted to look at their total milk loss during the fluctuation period after treatment. We had treatment records for over 15,000 cows from U.S. dairy herds that had confirmed bird flu outbreaks, and we compared the high, average, and low immunity plus breeding value groups to analyze the likelihood of requiring supportive treatment during the bird flu outbreak. We found that cows that had high immunity plus breeding values were 24% less likely to require supportive treatment than cows with low breeding values. And then for milk yield, we looked at over 119,000 daily milk yield records for just over 390 cows that were treated. And we looked at the difference in the cumulative difference between their actual and expected milk yield during the treatment period. So basically, in summary, we found that genetic selection for immune response can reduce their treatment needs, limit their production loss during an outbreak, and strengthen disease resilience for the cows and economic resilience for the producers during the outbreak.
And avian flu is not new. It's new to cattle maybe, but I mean, it's widespread. I live in Dane County, Wisconsin, and we just had on the news, a backyard coop has been quarantined. So just a little bit of background information on bird flu and how this is interesting that it did move into cattle.
Yeah, so it's been pretty endemic in birds for over 100 years now. Since the 90s, it really spread into pandemic potential within commercial poultry and
Mm-hmm.
especially in North America. But then it was, I think 2023 that they first discovered it in a dairy farm in the US. And that was the first outbreak within North America within cows. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And with the herds that you chose, how did you choose them? Are they Semex customers? Were they genomic tested? What drew you to those 6?
Yeah, so the herds we selected were all Elevate customers, Semex customers. So
Mm-hmm.
that meant we already had their immunity breeding values, which allowed us to link their genetic measures of immune response with how they performed on farm.
Mm-hmm.
What also was important was that they had detailed treatment records related to bird flu, and having both that genetic data through Elevate and the real world disease and treatment information recorded by the producer was really important for us to make the link between their immune response and treatment necessity.
And how long did this research take place over?
The research was conducted, it was using data collected over a 12-month period.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so the herds that you chose, they were clearly noticing bird flu because they were treated, and you chose herds that had treatment plans. So that's they were noticing it from the start, or what did that look like?
Yeah, so they were noticing clinical signs of the bird flu within the herd. They would see it in their herds, and they were already tracking the bird flu treatment records through their within herd treatment records. And so it gave us pretty real world data to work with. Like typical clinical signs they would see would be like decreased feed intake, rumination time. Cows would be lethargic, they'd have some respiratory symptoms, and the milk would be kind of like an abnormal color and consistency. But I think mostly the most noticeable symptom for the producers would be the drop in milk yield during the infection.
Mm-hmm. This involved veterinarians treating them, or were they just treated on farm by the herdsmen?
Yeah, for the most part, it was just treated on farm by the herdsmen. They no veterinarian intervention was involved. Yeah.
And what were
Yeah.
they treating with?
It would have been vitamin B supplementation. So it's basically just to manage symptoms.
I'd love to know a little bit more about the data that was collected. We can assume that all of the cows had the same amounts of exposure. Is that correct?
Yeah, bird flu, once it gets into a herd, it spreads pretty rapidly throughout the herd, either through contaminated milking equipment or bedding. It spreads pretty quickly. So yeah, we can pretty much assume that all the cows would have had exposure to it.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a study just on the cows, not the heifers, correct?
Just cows, yes.
Just cows. And you mentioned earlier you were studying their immune response. I think we need to just kind of revisit, what does that mean? Because it can be a little bit confusing because you're looking for a high response, which sounds bad, right? Like
Yeah.
to the layman.
Yeah, immune response is it's basically how an animal's immune system reacts when it encounters a challenge, whether it be like a pathogen, a virus, bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
And some animals are able to mount a strong immune response, but a well-regulated immune response that's able to help them fight off the infection effectively, while others can respond less efficiently, either a weaker immune response or a non-regulated one that causes too many symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And what's important to us is that the immune response isn't just shaped by their environment, it's partly genetic, which means that we can measure it and we can select for it too. And then breed animals that are better equipped to cope with the disease challenges. And there was variation in how the animals in the herds would respond to infection. And that's partly due to their immune response. We wanted to understand whether the differences in the immune response, which we know has a genetic component, could help explain why some of the animals handled the infection better than others.
Mm-hmm.
And did they notice that on the dairies that some were having a better response to those outbreaks?
Yeah, they would have noticed that some didn't have any clinical signs at all, and some had pretty severe clinical signs that indicated that they were not coping as well as others. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in short, high response good, low response bad.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And this is expensive. I mean, I think we've seen different, articles about what this costs a dairy, but just what do you see the economic impact being of the bird flu in these herds?
Yeah, it's mostly in the milk loss is the economic
Mhm.
impact. I've read that there can be an average drop in milk yield of up to 6% and up to 22% in individual cases, and that can be up to $500 per affected cow during an outbreak. With our results, we found that the high immunity cows were able to save 134 kilograms more milk. If you assume an average milk cost of 47 cents per kilogram, that can be a difference in production value for just under $62 per cow. So that's a pretty big difference. If you
Per
think
cow
about a
over what
500
the $62 over what time frame is that?
over a infection period, so it's
Ever
usually
infection
about
period.
a
Mhm.
month. Yeah.
A month.
Um,
30 days is what they expect.
yeah. And if you think about a 500 cow herd, that can be up to $31,000 in milk value.
Mhm.
Mhm.
For sure.
Absolutely. And then there's also the cost of any type of treatment that they're doing on top of that for any of the, especially that are showing clinical signs.
Exactly, and, like, vet intervention if it's needed. It
Time
Mhm.
definitely
lost.
adds up.
People on
Mhm.
farm just having
Yeah,
to deal
even
with some
labor.
labor
Yeah,
costs for sure.
Mhm.
And so I think when we think about Immunity Plus, this is one of the first data driven studies that we've had published in the Journal of Dairy Science. Congratulations. I believe you received an Editor's Choice Award, which means what? It was, what does that
Yes, thank
exactly
you.
mean for your
It
research?
means that the Journal of Dairy Science decided that this was a really timely piece of research and an important
Mhm.
piece of research, so it means that, they market it more,
Yeah.
but also means that it's an important piece of research that they want people to read, and
Mhm.
it's very relevant to the industry today.
Have you had a lot of people reach out about it?
Um,
Interested in what you did?
a few, yeah.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of questions, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
So really, at the end of the day, it is showing the power of using Immunity Plus bowls. So what do you think that that means for dairies?
Yeah, I think it's a really important, like, proof point for Immunity Plus, it shows that selecting for immune response has real benefits that are measurable when animals actually face disease challenges.
Mhm.
It and it basically it shows that Immunity Plus can provide defense against basically insert any disease here.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, it's not just about protection against one specific disease, it's a trait that can influence how animals respond to many different challenges.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And I think avian influenza is a really good example of that because it's an emerging disease that dairy cattle haven't historically been exposed to.
Mhm.
There's no prior immunity happening there. And it demonstrates that animals that have a higher immune response can be better equipped to cope with that kind of new challenge, either by reducing disease severity or improving recovery. And I think specifically for dairies, it means that immune response is a kind of proactive tool. And you're not just selecting for the diseases of yesterday, like what we already know about. You're also
Hmm.
building more resilient animals that are better prepared for what is coming next in the future too.
Mhm.
And talk a little bit about the heritability of immunity. Where do you see that?
hmm The heritability is moderate, so it's around 30%.
Hmm. Which
So
puts it on par with what other traits?
yeah, like it actually puts it on par with a lot of production traits,
Hmm.
like milk yield. And for disease traits, individual disease traits, the heritability is generally pretty low,
Right.
around 6 to 8%. But that's why Immunity Plus, it's got this moderate heritability. You can see genetic progress a lot faster than if you were just selecting for individual diseases.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
thinking about it, do you think, like you were talking before, what's its biggest impact or use case for prevention or for baseline herd health, future disease, being prepared for the next bird flu? Because we know it's coming. It's a global world now. Things travel. So where do you see its best use?
hmm I think the biggest impact would probably be long-term resilience, rather than like a single outcome. Like you said,
Hmm.
it contributes to stronger baseline herd health, which can help reduce the severity and spread of new diseases, like I was saying before, and also can play a role in outbreak management by improving how the animals cope and when there's a lot of disease pressure in the herd. Um, and yeah, like I said about selecting against individual diseases, immunity kind of targets overall robustness. So it makes them resilient to stress pathogens and changing environments over time, which can help also support reduced antibiotic use, better welfare, improved lifetime profitability, and also kind of strengthening sustainability within the herd and risk management at the herd level. So I think that's important too.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a phenomenal overview. I read the paper, but I think that this was so digestible and exactly what you guys were looking for, and all of those things. So I mean, I want to pivot a little bit, but stay on the immunity path. And you maybe teased a little bit of immunity with Angus, or what's next for Immunity Plus? Where's the research taking us?
Yeah, so we want to continue to focus on emerging diseases, like I said, and kind of understanding how immune response plays a role when the cattle face new disease pressures. Um, our goal is to kind of keep building evidence on around how the immune genetics can contribute to resilience, especially situations where there's little or no prior exposure. One example is we're interested in resilience to blue tongue in Europe, to look at how immune genetics can play a role in how animals respond to that disease.
Because there was a recent outbreak within the past, year, anyhow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we would be
So when
interested
would
in
we
looking at that.
expect to know about that? Because that will certainly interest particularly our Western European listeners.
Yeah, hopefully as soon as possible. I can't give you an exact date right now, but yeah,
But it's
working
coming,
on
like
it.
within the next
It's coming.
year, 2 years, we're going to
Yeah,
find out more
it's coming. Yeah.
information.
Mhm.
In the meantime, you would suggest that people probably test their genomic female
Yes, I
population
would.
and use Immunity Plus bulls.
Yeah, I would absolutely suggest that. I think that's a great idea.
And if somebody needs to reach out to you, they have questions, where do they find you, Shannon?
They can find me. My email is sbeard@semex.com. And they can find me on LinkedIn as well, Shannon Beard. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been
Yeah.
great.
Yes, thank you for your
Thank you.
time.
All right. Thank you for having me.